The fluorescent lights of the Zenith Worldwide Logistics Executive Boardroom hummed with a sterile, unforgiving intensity. Oliver Winston stood near the massive mahogany table, feeling the weight of his 55 years settling into the marrow of his bones. For 22 years, he had poured his soul into this company. He had built the transit nexus, the invisible digital circulatory system that routed $550 million in global freight every single day. He knew every line of code, every routing protocol, every hidden failsafe that kept the massive cargo ships moving across the oceans and the trucks rolling across the continents. Yet, as he looked across the table at Julian Pierce, none of that seemed to matter. Julian, a 38-year-old senior vice president with a freshly minted degree and an ego the size of a shipping container, leaned back in his leather chair. His suit cost more than the average warehouse worker, made in a month, and his smile was a sharp, predatory thing. For 8 months, Julian had been systematically dismantling Oliver's department, slicing budgets, firing veteran staff, and replacing seasoned professionals with cheap, inexperienced contractors. The disrespect had been palpable, a slow poison seeping into the corporate culture. Today was the breaking point. Oliver had calmly handed in his resignation, citing irreconcilable differences in operational philosophy. He had expected a tense but professional acknowledgement. Instead, Julian chose to make a spectacle. Julian chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound that echoed in the quiet room. Around the table, a half-dozen junior managers sat in uncomfortable silence, their eyes darting between the veteran director and the arrogant executive. "You think you are indispensable, Oliver," Julian said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You think, because you have been here since the dark ages of dial-up, that this place cannot run without you. Let me make something abundantly clear. You are replaceable inventory. The transit nexus is a machine, and machines do not need sentimental attachments. They just need operators." Oliver felt a muscle twitch in his jaw, but he kept his expression perfectly neutral. He did not raise his voice. He did not clench his fists. He simply absorbed the insult, letting it wash over him like rain off a waterproof tarp.
I have submitted my resignation, Julian.
Oliver said evenly. "I will work out my notice period if you wish, or I can leave today." Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table and steepling his fingers. "Oh, you are not leaving today, and you are not working out a notice period. You are going to go home, cool off, and realize how foolish you are being. You will take back this resignation by sunrise tomorrow, or you will be fired with cause for insubordination. And good luck getting a severance package or a recommendation after that." The junior managers exchanged nervous glances, but no one spoke. They were too terrified of Julian's wrath to defend the man who had trained most of them. Oliver looked at each of their faces, seeing the quiet apologies in their eyes. He understood. They had mortgages, families, careers to protect. He did not hold their silence against them. "By sunrise," Oliver repeated softly, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Sunrise," Julian confirmed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Consider it a generous grace period for an old man who has temporarily lost his senses." Oliver did not say another word. He turned on his heel and walked out of the boardroom. The silence he left behind was heavy, thick with the unspoken realization that a line had been crossed. He walked down the long, carpeted hallway toward his office. The walls were lined with framed photographs of massive cargo vessels bearing the Zenith logo, testaments to the company's global reach. Oliver had helped build that reach. He had spent sleepless nights troubleshooting server failures, spent missed holidays coordinating emergency reroutes during hurricanes, and sacrificed countless personal moments to ensure the freight never stopped moving. When he reached his office, he did not pack any boxes. He did not gather his framed degrees or the small trinkets he had accumulated over 2 decades. He only took his coat, his keys, and a faded photograph of his son Felix. Felix was 25 now, fighting a chronic illness that required expensive medical care. Oliver's mother was also in an assisted living facility, her care entirely dependent on his income. Julian knew about Oliver's financial responsibilities. The threat of firing him without severance was a calculated, cruel strike at his vulnerabilities. Oliver walked to the elevator banks. The clock on the wall read 6:10 in the evening. The bustling energy of the daytime operations floor had faded into the quiet hum of the night shift. He pressed the down button, the illuminated arrow casting a faint glow on his face. On the ground floor, he walked past the security desk. Henry, the night guard who had been working the desk for 15 years, looked up from his monitor. Henry was a solid, dependable man who always had a kind word for the late-night workers. "Heading out early, Mr. Winston?" Henry asked, a warm smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Yes, Henry, it is time to go," Oliver said. "See you tomorrow, sir. Have a good evening." "You too, Henry. Take care of yourself." Oliver pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the cool evening air. The city lights were beginning to flicker on, casting long shadows across the pavement. He walked to his car, his footsteps steady and deliberate. He was not a man prone to rash decisions or fiery outbursts. He was an engineer, a master of systems and logic. Julian Pierce thought he held all the cards. He thought he could bully and intimidate a man who had spent his life building the very foundation they stood upon. Oliver unlocked his car and slid into the driver's seat. He did not start the engine immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone and opened a secure remote access application. He stared at the screen for a long moment, the soft blue light illuminating the determination in his eyes. Julian had given him until sunrise. But Oliver knew the sun had already set on his time at Zenith Worldwide Logistics. The rain began to fall as Oliver navigated his sedan through the evening traffic, the rhythmic thwack of the windshield wipers providing a steady metronome to his racing thoughts. The city was a blur of neon and headlights, slick streets, reflecting the chaotic energy of the metropolis. But inside the car, Oliver felt a profound, almost terrifying sense of calm. The decision had been made. The bridge was not just burned, it was completely vaporized. His mind drifted to his son, Felix. At 25, Felix possessed a brilliant mind and a gentle spirit, but his physical health had always been fragile. The medical bills were a constant, looming mountain, a financial burden that Oliver carried with stoic determination. His base salary of $210,000 was substantial, but between the treatments for Felix and the rising costs of his mother's assisted living facility, the margins were thinner than anyone at the office would ever guess. Julian had undoubtedly looked at Oliver's tenure and assumed he was comfortable, complacent, and easily squeezed. It was a massive miscalculation. Oliver gripped the steering wheel, feeling the worn leather beneath his palms. For 8 months, he had watched Julian systematically destroy the department. It started with small things: denied budget requests for server upgrades, mandatory overtime for the junior staff without compensation. Then came the layoffs. Veteran engineers, men and women who understood the intricate, fragile nature of the transit nexus, were shown the door, replaced by algorithms and cheap contractors who did not understand the difference between a routing error and a catastrophic system failure. Julian called it optimization. Oliver called it a slow-motion disaster. The transit nexus was not just a piece of software. It was a living, breathing entity, a complex web of permissions, authorizations, and custom protocols that Oliver had personally designed over 2 decades. When Julian had taken over as senior vice president, he had demanded administrative access to everything, dismissing Oliver's warnings about the system's delicate architecture. But what Julian did not understand, what his expensive degrees and arrogant demeanor had blinded him to, was that administrative access was not the same as operational authority. Oliver pulled his car into the driveway of his modest suburban home. He turned off the engine and sat in the quiet dark for a few moments, listening to the rain drum against the roof. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone again. He opened the secure app that connected directly to the deepest layers of the transit nexus. He navigated past the standard security protocols, past the firewalls, and entered a private directory. These were his personal executive authorization keys. They were not company property in the traditional sense. They were digital signatures tied specifically to his biometric identity and his tenure, required to validate the most critical routing operations across the global network. Without them, the system would revert to a fail-safe mode, freezing all automated transactions to prevent unauthorized rerouting of high-value cargo. Julian had never asked about the executive authorization keys because Julian did not know they existed. He had assumed the system simply ran on the code he had purchased from the contractors. Oliver's thumb slid over to the screen. If he revoked his keys, the entire network would grind to a halt within hours. The automated cranes at the ports would stop. The customs clearance protocols would freeze. $550 million in freight would sit idle, locked in digital purgatory. It was the nuclear option. He thought of Julian's sneering face, replaceable inventory. Oliver pressed the button. The screen flashed green, confirming the revocation. The digital tether that had connected him to Zenith Worldwide Logistics for 22 years was severed. He stepped out of the car and walked into his house. The silence of the empty rooms was a stark contrast to the storm brewing outside. He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and sat at the small wooden table. He had one more task to complete before he could rest. He opened his laptop and brought up a private contact list. He scrolled past the names of vendors, past old colleagues, until he found the name he was looking for. Victoria Lawson, Chief Executive Officer of Apex Global Freight. Apex Global Freight was Zenith's largest and most aggressive rival. They had been trying to poach Oliver for years, recognizing the genius behind the transit nexus. Oliver had always declined out of a stubborn sense of loyalty. But loyalty was a two-way street, and Zenith had just bulldozed their end of it. He picked up his phone and dialed the number. It was past 8 in the evening, but he knew Victoria Lawson was not a woman who worked standard hours. The line rang twice before a crisp, authoritative voice answered. Victoria Lawson. Victoria, it is Oliver Winston. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, followed by a low, appreciative hum. Oliver, I was wondering if I would ever hear from you. To what do I owe the pleasure of a call at this hour? I am leaving Zenith, Oliver said, his voice steady. Effective immediately. Another pause, longer this time. When Victoria spoke again, all trace of casual conversation was gone. She was entirely focused. Are you bound by a non-compete clause? It expired 3 years ago, and Julian Pierce never bothered to have me sign a new one. He assumed I would never leave. Julian Pierce is a fool, Victoria stated flatly. I have watched him gut your department from the outside. I have been waiting for the structure to collapse. Have you secured a new position? Not yet, Oliver replied. But I have certain operational methodologies and a wealth of institutional knowledge that I believe would be highly beneficial to Apex Global Freight. I am sure you do, Victoria said, her tone sharp with calculation. Where are you right now? At home. Meet me tomorrow morning, 5:45, my office. Do not be late. I will be there, Oliver said. He ended the call and closed the laptop. The storm outside continued to rage, the rain lashing against the windows with furious intensity. But inside, Oliver felt the first genuine smile he had experienced in months pull at the corners of his mouth. The board was set. The pieces were in motion. Tomorrow, Julian Pierce would wake up to a sunrise he would never forget. The Apex Global Freight headquarters was a towering monolith of glass and steel, a stark contrast to the aging concrete brutalism of the Zenith building. Oliver arrived at 5:30 in the morning, the city still shrouded in the deep blues and grays of pre-dawn. The rain from the previous night had stopped, leaving the streets slick and clean. He walked into the massive lobby, his footsteps echoing in the quiet expanse. A single security guard sat at the polished marble desk. Oliver approached, offering a polite nod. Oliver Winston, I have a meeting with Victoria Lawson. The guard checked a tablet, his eyebrows raising slightly. Yes, Mr. Winston, she is expecting you on the top floor. The executive elevator is waiting. Oliver took the elevator up, watching the city slowly awaken through the glass walls. He felt a profound sense of clarity. For 22 years, he had been the unseen engine of a massive machine. Today, he was stepping out of the shadows. The doors chimed and opened onto a luxurious reception area. Victoria Lawson stood near a massive window, looking out over the harbor where ships bearing the Apex logo were already moving in the early light. She was a striking woman, radiating an aura of absolute competence and ruthless efficiency. Oliver, she said, turning to face him. She extended a hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes assessing. You are early. I appreciate that. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Victoria. She gestured toward a sleek conference table. Sit. Let us not waste time with pleasantries. You spent 2 decades building Zenith's infrastructure. Why walk away now? Oliver sat, folding his hands on the table. He did not speak of Julian's insults or the petty office politics. He spoke of strategy. Zenith is compromising its core operational stability for short-term financial gains. Oliver explained, his voice calm and measured. The leadership is dismantling the support structures that keep the network running. I refuse to be the scapegoat when the inevitable collapse occurs. Furthermore, my personal expertise is no longer valued there. Victoria poured 2 cups of black coffee from a silver carafe and pushed one toward him. And you believe your expertise is valued here? I know it is, Oliver replied, meeting her gaze evenly. I built the transit nexus. I know every vulnerability in global supply chain management. I know how to optimize routing in ways that your current systems, while impressive, have not yet achieved. I can increase your operational efficiency by at least 15% within the first year. Victoria took a slow sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving his face. She was silent for a long moment, the quiet hum of the building the only sound in the room. I know about your son, Oliver, she said softly. Oliver stiffened slightly, but his expression remained neutral. My personal life does not affect my professional capabilities. I know it does not, Victoria agreed quickly, but I also know that medical care is expensive. I know that Zenith pays you $210,000 a year. It is a respectable salary for a director, but it is an insult for the man who actually runs the company. She set her cup down and leaned forward. Julian Pierce is an arrogant child playing with adult tools. I have wanted you at Apex for 5 years. You are the invisible backbone of the industry. So let us make a deal. Oliver remained silent, waiting. $370,000 base salary, Victoria said, her voice crisp and clear. Comprehensive executive health coverage that includes full coverage for your son's specific treatments. A dedicated budget to build your own department, no questions asked. And a signing bonus sufficient to secure your mother's care facility for the next decade. Oliver felt the breath catch in his throat, but he maintained his composure. The offer was staggering. It was not just financial security. It was total, unmitigated validation of his worth. It was the resources he needed to save his family. What do you expect in return? Oliver asked. I expect you to do for Apex what you did for Zenith, Victoria said, a predatory smile touching her lips. I expect you to build the most efficient, indestructible logistics network in the world, and I expect you to help me crush Julian Pierce into dust. Oliver took a slow sip of his coffee. The bitter liquid grounded him, sharpening his focus. I accept your terms, Victoria. She reached into a folder on the table and slid a contract across to him, along with a heavy silver pen. I had the legal department drafted at 2 this morning. Read it over. Oliver did not need to read the fine print. He trusted Victoria Lawson's ambition far more than he had ever trusted Julian Pierce's promises. He signed his name with steady, deliberate strokes. Welcome to Apex Global Freight, Oliver, Victoria said, taking the contract back. You can start setting up your office today, though I imagine you might want to keep an eye on the news this morning. Oliver smiled, a genuine expression of satisfaction. I believe it will be an interesting morning in the logistics sector. He stood up and walked toward the window, looking out over the sprawling port facilities below. The sun was just beginning to breach the horizon, casting a golden glow over the water. Julian Pierce had demanded he return to Zenith by sunrise to beg for his job. The sun was up, and Oliver Winston was exactly where he needed to be. The chaos at Zenith Worldwide Logistics began exactly at 8 in the morning. Julian Pierce sat in his corner office, nursing a double espresso and reviewing a spreadsheet of projected quarterly savings. He felt a smug satisfaction. Firing the veteran director would save the company a significant amount in salary and benefits, and it would finally solidify Julian's absolute control over the division. He fully expected Oliver to crawl back into the boardroom by 9, head bowed, ready to accept whatever humiliating terms Julian offered. At 8:05, the phone on Julian's desk rang. It was the director of port operations in Rotterdam. Julian, we have a problem. The director's voice crackled over the line, laced with panic. The automated cranes have locked down. The system is rejecting all authorization codes for the incoming freighters. Julian frowned, annoyed by the interruption. Have you tried rebooting the local servers? You know how temperamental the system can be. We tried everything. The terminal says it requires executive authorization keys to proceed. Nothing is moving. We have 3 ships waiting to dock and a backlog of trucks a mile long. Before Julian could answer, his mobile phone vibrated. It was the operations manager in Singapore. Then the desk phone line too began flashing. Los Angeles. Within 15 minutes, the reality of the situation crashed down upon Julian Pierce with the force of a falling cargo container. The transit nexus was completely frozen. Julian sprinted out of his office and down to the main operations floor. The room, usually a model of quiet efficiency, was in utter bedlam. Technicians were shouting over each other. Alarms were blaring from the monitoring stations, and the massive digital maps on the walls were flashing red across every major port in the world. "What is happening?" Julian roared, grabbing the nearest junior engineer by the shoulder. The young man, one of the cheap contractors Julian had hired to replace Oliver's veterans, looked terrified. "Sir, the system is demanding master biometric validation. The executive authorization keys have been revoked from the central directory." "Whose keys?" Julian demanded, his face turning a mottled shade of red. "Oliver Winston's, sir. The system architecture is built around his digital signature for all high-level security clearance. Without his keys, the system defaults to a global lockdown to prevent unauthorized cargo movement." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "Bypass it, hack it. Do whatever you have to do to get those ports moving." "We cannot bypass it, sir," the engineer stammered. "It is hard-coded into the core registry. If we try to force an override, the system will initiate a total data wipe to protect the client manifests. We need Oliver Winston to manually re-authenticate." Julian stared at the flashing red screens. $550 million in freight was sitting dead in the water. For every hour a port was blocked, the local maritime authorities levied a fine of $70,000. And Zenith operated in 32 major ports worldwide. The financial hemorrhage was catastrophic. He rushed back to his office, his hands shaking as he grabbed his phone. He dialed Oliver's number. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed again, his heart hammering against his ribs. At 8:45, Oliver finally answered. "Oliver, thank God," Julian gasped, his earlier arrogance entirely evaporated. "Listen, we have a massive system failure. You need to get down here immediately. The transit nexus is locked down." Oliver's voice was calm, cool, and utterly indifferent. "I no longer work for Zenith Worldwide Logistics, Julian. My employment was terminated when I failed to retract my resignation by sunrise, as per your instructions." "Oliver, please," Julian begged, the desperation bleeding into his voice. "I was out of line, I admit it. Just log in and authenticate the keys. Name your price. We will double your salary. We will give you whatever you want." "You called me replaceable inventory," Oliver reminded him smoothly. "I suggest you replace me." "Oliver, the ports are freezing. We are racking up $70,000 a port every hour in fines. The clients are threatening to pull their contracts. The board is going to have my head." "That sounds like a managerial issue, Julian. I am an engineer. Or I was—" "Oliver, please, you cannot do this," Julian shrieked, his voice cracking. "I did not do anything, Julian. I simply removed my personal property from the premises when I left. You built a house on a foundation you did not understand, and then you fired the only man holding the blueprints. Good luck." The line went dead. Julian stared at the phone, his mouth opening and closing silently. He looked through the glass walls of his office at the chaotic operations floor, at the red flashing lights that signaled the end of his career. He was ruined. The realization hit him with sickening clarity. Oliver Winston had not just quit. He had detonated the entire company on his way out the door, and he had done it with perfect surgical precision. The fallout was swift and devastating. By noon, the news of the Zenith Worldwide Logistics System failure had hit the financial networks. The stock price plummeted. By evening, Zenith had accumulated over $2 million in port fines alone, but that was just the beginning. The delay in shipping critical components caused massive disruptions in manufacturing sectors across the globe. Within 48 hours, Zenith was facing $20 million in breach of contract damages from enraged clients. The board of directors held an emergency session that lasted through the night. When the dust settled, the bloodletting began. Julian Pierce was summoned before the board. There was no arrogance left in him, no tailored suits that could hide the absolute disaster he had orchestrated. He was stripped of his title, his stock options were frozen pending investigation, and he was unceremoniously fired for gross negligence. The junior managers who had silently watched Oliver's humiliation were left scrambling to pick up the pieces of a broken system they did not understand. Over the next month, the bleeding continued. Unable to guarantee reliable shipping timelines without their master architect, Zenith lost 40% of its major corporate clients. The clients fled to the only competitor capable of absorbing the massive influx of business, Apex Global Freight. At Apex, Oliver Winston sat in a spacious, sunlit office overlooking the harbor. The transition had been seamless. With the resources Victoria Lawson had provided, Oliver had built a new, more resilient version of the transit nexus, tailored specifically to Apex's infrastructure. His new department was staffed by the veteran engineers Julian had foolishly discarded, all of whom had gladly accepted Oliver's offer to join him at Apex with substantial pay increases. The atmosphere in Oliver's new department was one of quiet, focused excellence. There was no shouting, no arrogant executives demanding impossible metrics, only professionals doing what they did best under the guidance of a man they deeply respected. But the greatest victory was not professional. It was personal. On a crisp Tuesday afternoon, Oliver left his office early and drove to a specialized medical clinic on the outskirts of the city. He walked into the bright, cheerful reception area, feeling a lightness in his chest that he had not experienced in years. He found his son, Felix, sitting in a comfortable armchair in the recovery lounge. The young man looked tired, but the pallor that had haunted his features for so long was beginning to fade. The new, aggressive treatment protocol, fully covered by the Apex Executive Health Plan, was working. "Dad," Felix smiled, sitting up slightly as Oliver approached. "How are you feeling today?" Oliver asked, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "Better. The doctors said my markers are improving faster than they expected," Felix said, his eyes bright with hope. "I cannot believe we can finally afford this place. It feels like a dream." "It is real, Felix," Oliver said softly, a deep sense of peace washing over him. "You focus on getting better. I have everything else handled." Later that week, Oliver visited his mother at her assisted living facility. With the signing bonus from Apex, he had moved her to a premier suite with 24-hour specialized nursing care. She sat by a large window looking out over a beautifully manicured garden, looking more comfortable and relaxed than she had in a decade. Oliver sat with her, holding her frail hand, listening to her talk about the birds in the garden. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had spent his life building invisible systems to move cargo around the world, but this, securing his family's future, was the most important thing he had ever built. On his drive back to the office, Oliver's phone rang. It was Victoria Lawson. "Oliver, I just reviewed the quarterly projections," Victoria said, her tone brimming with satisfaction. "We have successfully integrated all of the defecting Zenith clients. Our operational efficiency is up 18%. You delivered exactly what you promised." "As did you, Victoria," Oliver replied. "It is a pleasure doing business with a professional." "I heard about Julian Pierce," Victoria added, a hint of dark amusement in her voice. "He is currently interviewing for a middle management position at a regional trucking firm in Ohio. Apparently, his reputation precedes him." Oliver smiled, watching the massive cargo ships moving smoothly across the water in the distance. He felt no pity for Julian, only the quiet satisfaction of a properly balanced equation. "A machine does not need sentimental attachments," Oliver murmured, echoing Julian's own words back to the universe. "But it does need an operator." He ended the call and drove back toward the gleaming tower of Apex Global Freight. The sun was shining brightly, the shadows were gone, and the future was entirely in his hands.